Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 16th of June 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So an update on the Three Arrows Capital situation today from Danny here, who's the head of trading at 8 Blocks Capital. So Danny put together a thread here talking about how they had a relationship with Three Arrows Capital and how 3AC kind of like withdrew money from kind of like one of their accounts. I think it was about $1 million and hasn't kind of been in contact with them about this. Now, you can read this thread for yourself, or I'm sure you've already seen it. But what I wanted to focus on was one part of the thread here where Danny says, what we learned is that they were leveraged long, they being 3AC, were leveraged long everywhere and were getting margin called. Instead of answering the margin calls, they ghosted everyone. The platforms had no choice but to liquidate their positions, causing the markets to further dump. Now, obviously, we don't know if this is 100% true or accurate, but from everything that we've seen, I think we can be pretty sure that it is relatively accurate here. This is not only like bad, this is really, really bad. Like, you don't ghost someone if you don't have the money to pay them back, right? Like, I'm sure we've all had friends in our lives ghost us when they've owed us money and things like that, or just people in general who have owed us money. And it's usually because they just don't want to kind of like deal with it because they don't have the money to pay it back. They don't want to deal with the consequences and all that sort of stuff there. So this is why I warn against leverage, guys. Like, it doesn't matter how smart you think you are, or how much money you think you have, or how much you can outsmart the market, or how long you think you can hold a position open for because you think you'll kind of like do well from it. It doesn't matter. If a firm like Three Arrows Capital, who everyone thought was kind of like giga brain traders, making shit tons of money here and there, if they can get into this position, then anyone can. Now, I don't know, obviously, the details of what they did. I suspect that they kind of like were just really, really mega long BTC and ETH, and then kind of like the crash happened and they were caught off guard by that. I think that people have been defending them and saying, oh, see, they were long with all of us. The PsyOps thing wasn't actually PsyOps. And I'm like, you don't even know the details, so how can you even be saying that? Like, if I had to speculate, I would say that they probably sold a lot of their other things and just rolled those profits into BTC and ETH longs, thinking that they could hold out long enough till the market went favorable again. But obviously the market turned against them, and not just them, everyone. And they took a big hit from Terra and things like that as well. So just another warning against leverage for you guys. Like, I see some people talking about levering up at these levels, being like, oh my God, it's a generational buying opportunity, but I haven't got the cash right now, so I'm going to lever up. You guys can do what you want, but when I see that, I start to think, okay, no, like, this is actually bad. And I start to kind of like think that, we've got further to fall, because if people are already levering up here, well, that's just a very, very obvious target for a market that is already in a downtrend to go after, right? Like, so you guys know my stance on leverage. I'm not going to lecture you about it again, but I think that this whole Three Arrows Capital situation really opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that anyone can get wrecked in this industry. It doesn't matter how invincible you think someone is, everyone can pretty much get wrecked at one time or another. Now, there are obviously some bigger players out there that people think, for sure, they're never getting wrecked, they're never going down. There's Binance as a perfect example here, Coinbase and FTX. But at the end of the day, guys, like, no company, no individual lasts forever. Like, obviously people don't live forever, so maybe their companies live on without them, but they don't last forever. They either lose to their competition eventually, they fall behind, they stop innovating, or they blow themselves up in some way. So I don't think it's good to kind of, I guess, think that any one individual, any company is invincible, especially in the crypto space, because we've seen plenty of the juggernauts come and go over the years, starting all the way back, pre-Gox. I mean, there were kind of like places that blew up pre-Gox, but Gox was like the biggest at the time. And then we just saw one of the biggest funds in this space blow themselves up as well. Obviously saw the Terra collapse, Celsius drama, all these sorts of stuff going on, guys. Like, yeah, just something to keep in mind when the next bull market inevitably rolls around is that you're going to feel all the same emotions you felt the last bull market. You're going to feel euphoric. Everyone's going to seem like they're winning. You're going to think that there's no way anyone can lose. And then the same thing will happen. We'll have another bear market. People will get flushed out, and you'll see the exact same things happening, just with different players. So that's what I learned from the last bear market. That's probably the number one lesson I learned from the last bear market, was that I saw all of this play out in similar ways. Not exactly the same. I think this one's been more brutal in terms of kind of like the amount of fallout from the bull market. But I saw the same things play out. Like, funds blew up, things went under. A lot of people that everyone thought was invincible kind of went under. And BitMEX actually was a big one back then that everyone thought was invincible, and then they kind of like had their drama surrounding them as well. So I took all that, and I took all that really, really seriously, and that's what allowed me to take take the profits that I did during the bull market. That kept me grounded to do that. So I think these things are what you need to learn from, if anything. On I guess like the investment side, obviously on the technology side, there's not that much to learn from this. Maybe you can learn some stuff from Terra and things like that. But in terms of investment side, these are the lessons, guys. These are the lessons that no one can teach you. These are the ones that I've spoken about for probably years at this point on the Refuel, where I've said to you, the markets, the experiences you have in them, that's the wisdom you need, and no one can teach you that. You have to experience it for yourself. Well, the last few months is that experience, and if you've been paying attention, you'll hopefully come out the other side a better investor, and if you're trying to trade, maybe a better trader. But we're mostly focused on investing on the Refuel as opposed to trading, or I guess like we're focused on the tech as opposed to anything else. But just on the market side of things, I think just very important to keep in mind that the last 6 months, and if the bear market goes on for another year or more than that, these are the lessons to take into the next bull market. And if you do that, I'm confident that you guys will make it out in the next bull market in a really, really good position for yourselves. But it's up to you. It's your journey. No one's going to tell you what to do, or people who are telling you what to do are not going to have your best interest at heart. They're not going to be able to kind of like take the risk for you. You're taking the risk at the end of the day. So something to keep in mind for sure. But you can read this whole kind of like thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. And just to round out the 3 hours capital drama here, Matt Cutler from the Blocknative team has put together a little dashboard on their mempool explorer here that allows you to track the mempool activity of some of the most active 3 hours capital wallets. So if you would like to track this, you can using this tool. I'll link that in the YouTube description below as well. So Peter from the Geth team here today has said a couple of things. So the first thing I will just kind of say, he's announced the difficulty bomb delay hard fork. So this is for the new Geth release version 1.10.19, which includes this hard fork. So basically, this is the one that I was talking about with regards to the difficulty bomb. It's called Glacier. This will push the difficulty bomb back by about 2 to 3 months, which means, and it's going live 29th of June. So this is a hard fork, but the only thing included is this difficulty bomb delay. Nothing else is included. Obviously, the merge isn't included or anything like that, but this definitely relates to the merge, right? So we've been speculating over kind of like timelines for the next test nets and then mainnet. So if I was to give my own timeline here, just and don't kind of like quote me on this, and don't send this to anyone. I don't take this as an official thing. This is my own timeline, my own estimation. Since this is going forward on June 29th, I would say that the Sepolia testnet will probably happen in early July. Then by late July, we'll probably do the Gurley testnet. Then we'll kind of like have August as a mainnet readiness month in terms of kind of like doing the hard forks on the execution and consensus layer to get their mainnets ready for the merge, and then the merge will happen in September. So still September for me, guys. Like that hasn't changed. I think that kind of like, the fact that we have a hard date for the difficulty bomb and a hard decision to delay the difficulty bomb is actually a real positive. I don't think it's going to take much overhead. These sorts of things, much overhead away from core devs. These sorts of things are very easy to do. It's a very simple change in the kind of like code base. And all that needs to happen is people need to upgrade their nodes and be aware of this. It is a short period of time, 2 weeks, until this kind of like goes live here. But we've done them this quickly before. So not a big deal. And for those who don't know, post-merge, there won't actually be a difficulty bomb anymore. So we won't even have to worry about this sorts of stuff. So, and the reason why they've only delayed it by 2 or 3 months is because they want kind of like to have like a target for the merge as well. So if you read between the lines here, 2 to 3 months, that's July, August, September, right? So it falls right into that September timeframe there. So I really do think that the unspoken kind of like thing from the core devs right now is that they are targeting a September mainnet. That's my speculation. That is not what I've kind of like gotten from core devs, but definitely it feels like September is the target and still remains the target, as I've been saying for a few weeks now. But as usual, if anything changes there, I'll give you guys the heads up. And if you are running Geth or any of the other kind of like nodes out there, you should definitely upgrade them when they're ready for the hard fork, because if not, you'll be left on a minority chain once the hard fork happens on the 29th of June. All right, so the other tweet that Peter put out today was something that I wanted to kind of like comment on, where he says, "Hey, Bitcoin peeps, when I'm criticizing Ethereum, it's not because I don't believe in it. It's because the first step towards improvement is acknowledgement. Also, it's better to be honest than to fake perfection. Wink, wink. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk." So Peter has had some interesting and controversial threads in the past. I've spoken about some of them on the Refuel before. There was that one about complexity within Ethereum, and then there was a bit about kind of like him praising Avalanche and stuff like that. Look, guys, I think pretty sure I said the same thing at the time where I said that the power of Ethereum and Ethereum development, Ethereum builders is that we do not just ignore the elephants in the room. We do not ignore the negative things about Ethereum. We don't not criticize Ethereum out of some kind of like religious belief that Ethereum is perfect. No, that's what Bitcoin does, and that's what Bitcoiners do. Within Ethereum, we criticize everything, and there's many, many different voices criticizing things. We listen to this, we listen to the feedback, we try to do things, as best we can, and we try to change things if they need to be changed. We're not married to any one design. Like take the beacon chain, for example. I mean, take proof of stake in Ethereum, for example, as a kind of like perfect example here. When the beacon chain was conceived as an idea, the previous work on proof of stake, most of it was pretty much scrapped, and that was like 3 or 4 years worth of work at that point that was just scrapped in order to do this beacon chain thing, which was a radical thing to do. But the thing is, we did it because it made the most sense to do it, and it's obviously paid off big time for Ethereum to do that. But that was a hard decision to make at the time, but we made it. Could you imagine that happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem? No, I don't think so. And Bitcoiners tend to think that everything is perfect with Bitcoin. They don't criticize Bitcoin. The only people criticizing Bitcoin seem to be the ones outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem. And then obviously the ones inside the Bitcoin ecosystem said, oh, it's just FUD, right? Like the security budget thing. Oh, it's just FUD. Ethereum maxis are just FUDding us. Like it's just stupid shit like that, right? So when Peter brings up things about Ethereum and when he's being critical of it, it's not because he doesn't believe in Ethereum or anything like that or wants to stop working on it. It's that he believes in it so much that he wants to make it the best thing it can be. So I think that's something to keep in mind, especially when you see threads from core devs or tweets from core devs criticizing something. It's not some grand conspiracy that they're being silenced by the other core devs and they're trying to speak up and no one's listening to them. No, not at all. People listen to people here. Like, yes, there are obviously going to be instances where some people don't listen and then some people get listened to more than others. But at the end of the day, it's a collaborative thing. Ethereum is a collaborative, distributed, decentralized project. It is not a monolith. It is not something that has a dictator. Vitalik's not there just calling the shots. There is a lot of people, hundreds of people across the research and dev teams on the core side, on the protocol side, having input and kind of like having discussions. And that's why things can actually take a while, because we need to consider everyone's input. We need to consider everyone's kind of like voice in order to make sure we aren't missing anything. Because these networks, crypto networks, are not to be messed with. They handle real money. Like you don't move hard, you don't move fast and break things with crypto networks, especially at the protocol layer. So just wanted to kind of give some comments around Peter's tweet here because I thought it was a really, really good one. All right, so an update here from the Nethermind team. So the Solidity to Cairo just got serious, as Greg says here. The first stable release of Warp 2.0 will be undergoing an audit, and Warp 2 is orders of magnitude better than Warp 1. And for those of you who don't know or need a refresher, Warp is Nethermind's tool in order to transpile Solidity code to Cairo in order to work on StarkNet. So they've been working on Warp 2.0 for a while, and now it's heading to audit, and they're claiming that Warp 2.0 is orders of magnitude better than Warp 1 in any way that you measure it. So if you're a developer, definitely this is something you need to be keeping an eye on. There's also kind of like the code here that's going to audit, and everything's open source on GitHub as well for you to check out. So just wanted to give a quick shout out there because this is something that's very important, especially for developers out there. All right, so Linda Shea from Scalar Capital had an interesting tweet today that I actually wrote a newsletter about, but I'll just give my TLDR take on the refill as well. But her tweet basically stated or said, "This would be my third bear market working in crypto, and it's by far the most optimistic I've ever been in one. Just look around at the talent and products being built. We were nowhere close to this level in the past bear markets and will only keep coming out stronger as before." So I've been through technically one bear market, but 3 cycles, because I was in Bitcoin in 2013, but I didn't stick around for the bear market in 2014 and 2015. And then I was obviously stuck around for the 18-19 bear market. So that's what I kind of relate to. And guys, like, there was nowhere near this amount of optimism in 2018 and 2019. Like Ethereum, I mean, I don't have to kind of like rehash everything I've said in the past, but Ethereum was nothing like it is today. Absolutely nothing. It was literally like not even 1% of what it is today. So that's why you're seeing a lot more people that are just like optimistic about the future of this ecosystem, especially Ethereum, because we actually have use cases. There's a clear path to getting adoption of these things. There's a clear path to kind of building applications that people actually want to use. It's so different. And we have evidence that people will use these applications beyond just speculative activities too. People are still using them today. You know, Uniswap, actually, I just saw before, had more daily fee revenue than the Ethereum network. I think that's the first time ever. But it's kind of like apples to oranges there, because Uniswap fee revenue is LP revenue or liquidity provider revenue, whereas Ethereum fee revenue is network revenue. And Uniswap is deployed across multiple networks, not just Ethereum layer 1. So and then that aggregates all of that. So it's not apples to apples, but my point is that there's still the usage there, right? Like the usage of all of these DeFi applications, especially the top ones, are still there. NFTs are still being used. Like, yes, it's not like the mania phase that we saw, but there's still a lot of stuff happening in the NFT space. DAOs as well. I'm going to talk a bit more about DAOs a bit later. Layer 2s, obviously, all the stuff, like everything that you can think of is still being worked on. People are still excited about, still experiments going on, things are still getting funded, teams have still got runway. So it's just so different to 2018 and 2019. Back then, we only had the very first glimmers of DeFi kind of like popping up. Layer 2 scalability was in no man's land. NFTs were a joke because CryptoKitties ended up being a fad. DAOs were, still recovering from the DAO of 2016. ICOs were completely dead, like definitely completely gone at that point. ETH didn't really have any path to a value accrual. A lot of the stuff was kind of like in the future, and no one had faith that those things would be implemented, like 1559 and stuff like that. So it's just totally different. It's literally not even worth comparing, because the Ethereum of 2018 and 2019 may as well be an entirely different network compared to what it is today. So I'm generally kind of like an eternal optimist, but just looking at other people in the ecosystem and the amount of optimism there still exists within the ecosystem, it's at all-time highs, guys. Like, I feel like in terms of the builder, like I separate people into kind of like new retail investors and builders. The retail investors are gone, but the builders that are here and that kind of like stuck around, they're more optimistic than ever. They just want to keep building. So I look at that. That's my kind of like one of my bull cases for Ethereum, or kind of like one of my strongest ones. So from that kind of like perspective, there's nothing to be bearish about. And that's why I can keep being bullish, is because I look at those sorts of things. I mean, obviously the ETH prices come down a lot, but like I don't look at that as a measure of kind of like short-term kind of success or short to medium-term success. I look at it as a long-term success, but in terms of like short to medium term stuff, it's definitely, okay, who's around, who's building, what's being built, is it sustainable, is it actually going to be used, does it make sense, all this sorts of stuff. And that for me is at an all-time high, basically. So really, really cool to see that playing out there. All right, a couple of tweets from Polynya today. So first one is about the endgame holy grail is multiple rollup sequences composing to a shared state and proof. Sharp already does the proofs bit, as StarkNet, Immutable X, Diversify, SoRare, and presumably most StarkNet L3s all share proofs. Ethereum verifies a single proof for all. The next step is also shared state. So to Ethereum, it just looks like 1 giga rollup. And I think giga rollup, I don't think anyone said that before. So that's a new term to enter into the Ethereum lexicon there, giga rollup, right? This is what true parallelism looks like. You can have 1,000 plus block producing machines, each faster than any monolithic chain, while retaining full composability and security. This is the holy grail, guys. Like I've mentioned this before. Shared state and proof generation basically means that you can have, so if you have shared state, what it fundamentally breaks down to is that you can literally share kind of like everything between every different kind of like application, every different rollup in potentially real time, depending on how it's kind of built here. And with the shared proving, you can amortize that cost across across everything, so the costs basically collapse, and you have like a much cheaper ecosystem because of that. So the state thing, I think, is the most important, because of the fact that the rollups are kind of like fragmented right now, right? Like we use bridges to get across them. There are other things coming out, like being able to kind of like tap into liquidity on one rollup and pour it to another. And there's all these kind of things being built. But in terms of kind of like a messaging, maybe not a messaging protocol, but in terms of something that allows us to arbitrarily kind of like send messages across different rollups, and kind of like for rollups to really talk to each other, that's where the shared kind of like state comes into it. And this sort of stuff is very early in its life cycle still. It's not something that's going to come anytime soon in terms of kind of like being ubiquitous across the ecosystem. But we do have the first iterations of it. So Polynya mentioned Sharp here, which is the shared prover from StarkWare. There's also some kind of like things like StarkWare's DAMM, and Rari was working on the kind of like there was something from Rari, I can't remember what it was called. They were working on being able to kind of like share liquidity between layer 1 and layer 2. Aztec Connect from Aztec Protocol as well, being able to do private DeFi and kind of like share that state there. So there are the first kind of like inklings of it coming out. but it is an end game sort of thing. And it is the holy grail. If we can get to that, then we can have basically infinite scalability. I'm not going to say like actual infinite scalability, but enough scalability to probably satiate like most of the world's appetite for block space, which I think, as Polynya said, is the holy grail and what we should be working to. So very, very cool that for them to highlight this today. And then the second tweet is about proof of stake. So Polynya says, we all know proof of stake will reduce energy consumption for the Ethereum network by over 99%, but there's another savings that is less discussed: silicon efficiency. On Rari Finance in early 2021, I had estimated 97% reduction in silicon usage to here's revisiting the topic, and does kind of like a thread about this here with a share, with a kind of like screenshot of that Rari Finance post there. So basically what Polynya is saying here is that because we won't have to rely on mining hardware anymore because it won't be proof of work, the silicon kind of like use reduction of Ethereum will collapse, right? Because you don't need to have an industrialized mining farm, right? Say you have like 100 or maybe 1,000 GPUs. And the farms are much bigger than this, but just for the sake of example, say you have 1,000 GPUs, right? Each one of those GPUs has a chip on it, right? So it's 1,000 chips. So the equivalent in kind of proof of stake, you could potentially run 1,000 validators on one kind of like really beefy server, right? Or maybe one or two or three. I mean, it's kind of like hard to do the hardware math in my head right now, but obviously it's like a very small percentage of what you would be required for a GPU farm, right? Or for an ASIC farm, right? For example. So from that point of view, it's a less talked about thing, as Polynya notes here, but it's still very important. There's the massive energy reduction, but there's also the massive reduction in silicon usage, which means less e-waste, which means kind of, I guess, like better narratives as well, not just from the practical things, but like the second order narratives. I've talked about it before, but gamers are probably going to love us once they figure out that Ethereum no longer is on proof of work and GPUs don't work on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is all ASICs. So I think they're really going to love us because GPU prices are going to absolutely collapse. They're already coming down, but they're going to get so much cheaper once all those GPUs flood the market there. So very cool for Polynya to highlight this. I think it's very important to think about these things. All right, so someone in the Discord channel asked me to highlight this kind of, I guess, bit of drama that's going on here, and Kobe did a thread about it with the Tribe and Rari protocol stuff. So Kobe basically starts off this thread by saying, this Tribe Rari stuff is a complete mess. Hard to be more bearish on DAO governance than after following this. In April, an $80 million exploit on Fuse happened. In May, governance voted to use the funds to make those that lost money whole. Basically, an $80 million refund from Tribe to users of Fuse, which is owned and operated by Tribe. TIP 112 was proposed to move things forward. Extremely slow progress, radio silence. And then a veto vote passed to cancel this TIP, and all TIP did was move forward with the next steps to action the already approved refund. But Tribe leadership claimed the votes have been confusing, and they're ordering a second vote. Now the DAO seems to be voting against repaying the debt in contrast to the previous vote from May. The vote titles and proposal pairs do not match, so it's kind of hard to even tell that specifically anyone is even voting on anymore. Additionally, the Tribe founding company Fair Labs is signaling against the refund, and you have to wonder what the point of all this is if a vote that says make the community whole can be 180 5 weeks after it passed. Do DAO votes mean anything if we just keep hosting another vote on the same topic until founders get the answer that they want? So there's a lot to unpack here. Obviously, I'm going to try and do my best to I guess give my thoughts on this. So I've talked about DAOs a lot in the past and how I think that DAOs without any sort of leadership or coordination will fail. And they'll fail pretty badly. And failure looks different for different DAOs, but just generally, I think they're going to fail. Now, the ones that do have leadership and coordination, there's no guarantee of success there because at the end of the day, it depends who is leading and who is coordinating. Is it still the core team? Okay, well, a lot of the times the core team owns a majority of the supply or owns a large chunk of the free float supply, I should say, not the total supply, but the free float supply, so they can basically vote against anything, right? And the Gen Spartan actually had a great tweet here that Kobe references where he says, protocol governance explained. There's a snapshot vote that says, which color Lambo should the founder buy? 11% is voting for yellow, 89% is voting for black. Then the founder says, but I like yellow. So the founder votes yellow, and now 96% is voting for yellow and 4% is voting for black. And that was exactly illustrating my point where because the founders or founders have so many tokens, they can do whatever they want with the vote. And because they are the leadership and the coordination, especially early on in the project, there's no one to really question them there. So I agree with Kobe that these DAO votes, I mean, they don't mean anything when it's like this. And these DAOs, they lose a lot of legitimacy when they act like this. For all of the faults of, I think, something like Uniswap governance, I don't think the team has vetoed anything or with their kind of like tokens, or voted against anything with their tokens or anything like that. I may be wrong here, but then they have the other issue of just lack of leadership and coordination. So I think the way I kind of like view these things is the best way to, I guess, have a DAO is that you need to start with a very, very solid base from day one, basically. And it can even start before you tokenize and before you create a DAO, where you basically have this thing where you're like, okay, well, here's what we have as our plan long-term for the DAO. Here's where the founding team fits in this. Here's where the community fits in this. And you definitely want to communicate that to everyone in a really kind of like coherent way and adhere to that for the legitimacy aspect of it too. Something like what Optimism has done. I think Optimism's DAO model is actually really interesting, and they've communicated it quite clearly from what I've seen. And they've also kind of like been very transparent about it, and right now it has a lot of legitimacy. It remains to be seen how legitimate it is in the future, but right now it has a lot of the legitimacy there, because every time you basically do something that the majority doesn't like as part of a DAO, you lose legitimacy. And it's no different to real life kind of like governance, I suspect, right? Because for example, say the majority 80% or 90% are against something, and then the 10% are the ones that are in power, and they get to kind of like get their way. Well, then that power just loses a little bit of legitimacy, and over time it gets chipped away until eventually some countries lead to revolution, right? When the legitimacy of the government just completely goes out the window, the people no longer have faith in them, and the people want change, and change usually comes with violence there. And that's like the extreme example. Or you can have apathy. With DAOs, it's a lot easier to be apathetic. Within a country, it's very hard, because obviously the switching costs from moving from one country to the next is very high for most people. But with a DAO, the switching cost is extremely low. Like, unless you're heavily involved with the DAO, unless you're part of maybe unless you're the founder, the switching costs are very, very low. And even if you're part of the founding team, or if you're part of the original kind of like team, or if you're part of the team at all, your switching costs are still relatively low, because you can go work for another team, right? And if you're just a DAO kind of a community member, or have just been a community member for a while, it may be hard to cut the cord on what you're passionate about within this project. But again, the switching costs are comparatively very low. So I think with fluid governance, as you can see with a lot of these DAOs, there is fluidity in the governance where you can like delegate to people really quickly. You don't have to wait like 4 years, right? And there's no elections or anything like that. You just delegate to who you think is doing a good job. And the fluidity of just voting on things and everything being open and everything happening really quickly, the switching costs are just collapsed very, very low. So if your DAO loses legitimacy early on in its life, well, it's going to be very, very hard for that DAO to gain that legitimacy back later on. And that's going to lead to a very, very tough time for projects that want to actually decentralize and want to have a community behind them. So, and just generally with DAO governance, I think that it's going to be very, very hard to scale it out. There's only going to be probably a handful of very, very successful, truly decentralized, scaled out DAOs. And there's going to be a lot of smaller ones that probably just look more like companies, like regular companies, and they do like DAOs, because of the fact that coordination among humans is very, very difficult. We've spent thousands of thousands, tens of thousands of years getting to democracy, which is the least worst coordination or governance mechanism in the world. It is not perfect. It's far from perfect. As I said, least worst system. It's just better than all the other systems that we've come up with over the tens of thousands of years that we've been doing governance. But I think that the same is true for DAOs. It's probably not going to take us that long, but there's going to be a lot of iteration, a lot of experiments, a lot of things playing out. We may get to a model that makes sense eventually, but right now it's the Wild West. Right now, a lot of DAOs look like they're going to just completely fail. The projects may fail by proxy as well, because if they can't decentralize, and if the team doesn't want to be responsible for all the things that happens in the project anymore, well, the project might just die off, right? So that's kind of like my general thoughts on all of this. Not specific to what's happening with Tribe and Rari here. I should disclose that I'm an investor in Tribe or Fae protocol, but I'm not specifically commenting on this because of that. But I just think that this just commenting on this event itself wouldn't illustrate my point like what I just kind of said there. So I have no opinion on this. I didn't participate in this vote. I kind of like don't plan to. I haven't really been following this, so I don't have a kind of opinion on this event itself. But I do have a lot of opinions about DAOs, and I'm just going to leave it there for now, though, because I'm running out of time here, and there's a few other things I want to get through before I finish up on today's episode. So StarkWare has announced a strategic partnership with Only Dust here. So Only Dust is the marketplace that allows developers to contribute to building the StarkNet ecosystem. So if you're interested in contributing to the future of Ethereum scaling, this is the place for you. Again, another one for developers here. I just wanted to shout it out because I know there are developers that listen to the Refuel. So if you haven't checked out Only Dust yet, you should definitely do so. I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to check out there. Just going to power through these last two things here. So Immutable has introduced Arch V1 today, which is Immutable X's NFT bridging protocol between Ethereum L1 and StarkNet L2. So you can check out more info on their blog post here about how Arch works, and this is just the first step to kind of like what they're trying to do here with their bridging. There was a Bankless podcast recently with the Immutable guys that you should definitely go listen to if you would like to learn more about this. But yeah, I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to check out below. All right, last up here, just a reminder that Gitcoin Grants round 14 is continuing. Once again, thank you everyone who's donated to the Daily Gwei and ETHUB as usual. There's been over 200,000 contributions so far, so I think this is the biggest round yet. But don't just stop there. Don't just stop donating. If you haven't donated yet, be sure to do so. I'll link this in the YouTube description, of course, but you can go to gitcoin.co/grants and donate there to all your favorite projects. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.